So a little fundamental quirk of the Quake engine to understand when it comes to movement is turning plus movement equals speed. If we have a little speedometer here, you can see that by default you move at 320 units per second. What's a unit? No one knows, but this is how many we're going at. But watch what happens when I turn my mouse. That's right, your character moves a little faster. The reason this happens is that the developers of Quake decided that it didn't feel good for your character to just go whatever direction you point the character in at a static pace. They wanted to add a little flow to your movement, like Doom. So there's a little smoothing transition whenever your character changes directions. So for instance, if you're going forward and change directions to strafe right, your character won't immediately cut to the right, but will circle into it. But during that smooth transition, there's actually a brief moment where your character gains a little speed. Whether this was intentional or not, I don't know, but it feels good. I assume maybe this was included to not make smoothing feel sluggish, but whatever the reason, I don't think the developers of Quake could have ever imagined the Pandora's box this little bug/feature would open for the entire series of games and beyond. Now, of course, you can only go so fast, due to ground friction and an acceleration limit. Not a speed limit, mind you, just a limit to how fast you can gain speed. So if you spin around like a top, you won't immediately gain 5,000 UPS. Sorry. In fact, at a certain point, if you turn too fast, the game will slow you down. To get the absolute most acceleration, you have to skirt just along this limit. So see how far you can push it, get a real feel for that edge, and after a while, I swear to God, you will feel it. Now of course, the friction of the world brings you right back down to 320 UPS pretty quickly. But where is there no friction? That's right, the air. That's not actually true because like, wind resistance. Like, skydivers and birds would have a pretty rough time if that was true, they'd be like but in Quake there's no friction in the air, that dragon's a fucking hacker. So if you do any kind of turn into a jump, you will actually maintain that momentum from the speed in the jump. This is called a circle jump, because typically to achieve this effect, players kind of spin their characters and launch into it. Typically holding forward and strafe in the direction you want to jump is the most effective way to do this. But any form of turning in the game followed by a jump within the acceleration limit produces similar effects. There's actually a great way to try this out right at the beginning of the game. Typically to get to the hard difficulty, you have to jump off the edge of one of these spikes to make the jump over the lava pool. But if I use a circle jump, I can make it from before I even hit the platform I'm supposed to jump from. I'd recommend just pausing the video and going into Quake right now at this point in the video and playing around with these jumps if you never have before. It makes the game infinitely more fun just knowing this trick. It turns Quake into a shooter with Mario long jumping, it just rules. But you're not here for Mario, are you? You're here for bunny hopping. So the sad part about going fast in the air is eventually you have to come down. But when you do, you still actually maintain that momentum at the moment you hit the ground before you slow down. So if you continually jump, well, you maintain your momentum for a little bit longer. Congratulations, you're bunny hopping. This even happens if you buffer your jumps, which you can do by the way, so there's no need to bind scroll wheel to jump like other games with b-hopping. But eventually, your character will slow down from the tiny moments of friction you experience as you hit the ground. If only there was a way to turn in the air. Well, there is, but it's weird. So let's say we make a forward-facing jump. If you hold forward into your momentum, nothing happens. If you hold one of the strafe keys, almost nothing happens, except your character gets nudged a tiny bit. And if you hold backwards, the game kills your momentum outright. There's little to no air control in a way that feels almost intentional, which actually leads me to believe at some point they found out that players turning around in the air could cause problems. Later Quake games just said screw it and allowed players to have full range of motion in the air at the cost of it being slower to change directions. But in Quake 1, they decided not to deal with it and nerfed air control in a really janky way. But they didn't catch one method. So let's say we're jumping facing forwards again. If you press strafe left and turn your mouse left, you'll turn to the left. And if you press strafe right and turn your mouse right, you'll turn to the right. And you'll build speed. Gold Source and Source Game fans are probably already familiar with this. It's called air strafing. And bunny hopping combined with air strafing can give you ridiculous amounts of speed. I believe the reason this happens has to do with the game allowing you to nudge your momentum to the side a little bit, like I showed earlier. This has the side effect of shifting your direction, which then allows you to nudge yourself again, and it creates a cycle that leads to this turning effect. I know it's still confusing, but it doesn't really matter how it works. Not many players actually know how it works. A lot of tutorials and even the wiki get it very wrong. For instance, there's a misconception that this technique only works with strafing, and despite the name of the mechanic, that's actually not true. The easiest way to see this is if your character is jumping to the side. You can actually hold forward and spin around like this. You can even do it diagonally if you really want to mindfuck yourself. Whatever direction you press is the axes your character can maneuver itself around. A really good analogy is that it's like you're in a boat, and whatever direction you press, you're sticking the oar into the water in that direction, and when you move your mouse, you're pushing that oar and moving yourself around that force. And now you can gain speed in the air. You're unstoppable. Even the laws of physics can't stop you now. But the problem is, you're still not going all that fast as the super cool speedrunners and deathmatchers you've seen on YouTube. There's a few reasons for this. One is that little bit of friction you get when you hit the ground is still pretty detrimental. Unless you're b-hopping incredibly efficiently, you're probably going to hover around the 400 to 500 UPS mark. Not bad, but we can do better. The absolute fastest way to b-hop in Quake is called power bunny hopping. This is a much harder form of bunny hopping that requires you to set the always run option to off. Between each jump, you have to hit forward in the direction you're moving. This is pretty hard to do precisely because when you're in the middle of an air strafe, even though it feels like you're moving forward, your actual direction is typically lagging behind just a hair. So the most effective technique requires very quick air strafes before straightening yourself out before you hit the ground. On top of that, you have to be incredibly efficient in skirting along that acceleration edge like I said earlier. I'm gonna be honest, I don't typically use power bunny hops when just playing Quake casually, because in my opinion, it's too much of a chore. Basic b-hopping may not be the fastest way to get around, but it is the way I like to play the game. And it's easy enough where it just makes the game more fun. It still makes it a lot easier to get to where you need to be in casual death matches, and just gives you a lot more options when it comes to movement and positioning in combat. So unless you're planning on being a speedrunner, then just focus on getting those basics down and have fun. Or you can try Quakeworld, the competitive version of Quake multiplayer, which actually had that bit of friction when you hit the ground removed in an update years ago. This is why you'll see deathmatchers fling themselves across the map with ease, but you'll see speedrunners busting a gasket trying to top 500 UPS. But something to note when it comes to strategy is that even in Quakeworld with the improved speed, in Deathmatch you don't want to be b-hopping all the time. Because of that famous huh sound in Quake, you actually make a lot of noise when you're hopping all over the place. You are essentially trading off knowledge of your location for speed, and it's not always the decision you want to make if you want the upper hand in combat. But if you want to take a more stealthy approach, a much quieter and still decently fast way of moving is wallrunning, where you hold diagonally into a wall to get a speed boost. Depending on the version of the game you're playing, this can be very easy or kinda janky. Older versions of Quake have stickier walls, where if you don't hit them at just the right angle, they'll stop you dead in your tracks. But these were actually removed with Quakeworld and also in the remaster. I'm not entirely sure why wallrunning happens. It might be the game trying to do that speedy movement smoothing thing, but being blocked from doing it by the wall, which could create a sustained speed boost as the game continuously tries to change your direction. A trade-off of this movement technique though is being right up against a wall understandably makes rocket splash damage absolutely brutal. So it's a good idea to practice breaking off when your opponent spots you. That's it for today. I hope this video made Quake a little more fun for you, or explained some of the magic you see in pro gameplay. Next time I'm going to be going over vertical movement like ramp jumping, rocket jumping, and grenade jumping. Also, my new Quake map, Save the World, is out now, and it's very much built around Quake acrobatics. So go check that out if you want a movement-friendly map. Also, I opened up a Patreon. Subscribers will get early access to videos and mods. See you next time.